Officer Bradley scans the street outside the courthouse with a practiced eye, his attention drawn to a well-dressed black man standing near the entrance, glancing at his phone as if waiting for someone. The man seems out of place, or so Bradley thinks, his mind jumping to conclusions. The officer's eyes narrow. His instincts, shaped by years of bias, tell him something is off. Without any real reason other than his own prejudices, Bradley decides to intervene. He steps forward with an air of authority, his hand resting on his belt, and approaches the man. "Hey, you!" Bradley barks, his voice loud enough to draw the attention of a few passers-by. "Let me see some ID. What are you doing here?" His tone is accusatory, already assuming guilt where none exists. Jacob, the man he's addressing, lifts his gaze from his phone. He remains calm, unflinching, as if this is not the first time he's faced this kind of confrontation. "Is there a problem, officer?" Jacob asks evenly, his face unreadable, his voice steady. Bradley's irritation grows. He feels the situation slipping from his control. "I asked for ID," he snaps. "You're loitering. This is a public building, not a place to hang around for no reason." Jacob, sensing the crowd gathering, maintains his calm demeanor. "I'm just waiting for my car," he explains simply, but his words seem to fuel Bradley's frustration even more. "Your car?" Bradley repeats, his tone mocking. "You think you can stand around here and just—" He stops, realizing how many eyes are on them now. Determined not to back down, he reaches out again, more aggressively this time. "Show me some identification now." Jacob calmly reaches into his pocket, pulling out his wallet. He hands Bradley his ID without a word, his expression composed. Bradley glances at the ID, and his face suddenly drains of color. The name and title on the card are unmistakable. Jacob is the newly appointed district attorney. A wave of shock and confusion washes over Bradley. He stumbles over his words, trying to recover his footing. I didn't know. I mean, you didn't say," he mutters, his usual confidence faltering. Jacob watches him carefully, still calm but now with a sharper edge to his voice. "You didn't ask, officer," he replies quietly. "And I've been watching you. You see, I've noticed how you treat people who look like me. How quick you are to jump to conclusions." Bradley tries to interrupt, but Jacob holds up a hand. "No, let me finish. You've been on my radar for weeks. I've seen the way you profile, the way you misuse your authority. And I've been waiting for the right moment to confront you about it." Bradley's mind races. He knows he's crossed a line, but his pride won't let him admit it. "Look, I'm just doing my job," he argues, still trying to justify himself. But his words sound hollow, even to his own ears. Jacob doesn't flinch. "Your job is to protect and serve," he says firmly. "Not to harass and intimidate based on your assumptions." The tension in the air is palpable. Bradley feels trapped, cornered by his own actions. He's aware that he's in no position to argue further, not with his job and reputation hanging in the balance. Yet, instead of pressing charges or threatening disciplinary action, Jacob surprises him. "I'm not here to ruin your career, officer," Jacob continues, his tone now more reflective. "But I am here to hold you accountable. I'm giving you a choice, an opportunity to change. To redeem yourself?" Bradley blinks, taken aback. This isn't what he expected. "What do you mean?" he asks cautiously, unsure of where this is going. Jacob explains. "There's a program, a transformative one. It's designed to help people like you understand the impact of their actions, to confront their biases, and to grow from it. You can either participate in this program, commit to changing, or face the consequences of your behavior." For a moment, Bradley is silent, weighing his options. He's confused, maybe even a little scared, but he knows Jacob isn't bluffing. "And if I refuse?" he asks, testing the waters. Jacob doesn't hesitate. "If you refuse, there will be disciplinary action. A review of your conduct. I'm not looking to destroy your life, officer, but I won't tolerate this behavior either." Bradley considers his choices, realizing that he has little to lose by agreeing. His pride is wounded, but his job, his livelihood, is on the line. With a resigned nod, he finally says, "All right. I'll do it. I'll join the program." Jacob offers a slight smile, a small gesture of hope in a tense moment. "Good," he replies. "This isn't about punishment, Officer Bradley. It's about change." Bradley returns home that evening, his mind a swirl of conflicting emotions. He feels a sting of humiliation from the confrontation with Jacob. A district attorney, a black man, had not only caught him off guard but had also put him in a position he couldn't easily escape. His pride flares, telling him to reject the proposal outright. He's spent years on the force, believing he's always been fair, just doing his job. But now, the idea that he might have been wrong, that he might be the problem, grates against everything he thinks he knows about himself. Yet the fear of losing his job gnaws at him just as fiercely. He imagines his badge being taken away, his reputation in shambles, and the shame that would follow. All those years of service, the promotions, the commendations, could they all be wiped away by a single, seemingly innocuous moment? He considers his options, playing out each scenario in his head. If he refuses Jacob's offer, there could be hearings, a formal inquiry, and the media might catch wind of the story. He could end up losing everything he has worked for. But if he agrees to this program, he might just keep his job, even if it means swallowing his pride. Bradley paces around his small living room, wrestling with his thoughts. Eventually, he realizes he has no real choice. The risk is too great. He decides to take Jacob's offer, albeit reluctantly. Maybe, he thinks, it's just a hoop to jump through, something he can get over with quickly. The next morning, Bradley arrives at the district attorney's office, ready to hear what's in store. Jacob greets him with a calm but serious demeanor, explaining that the program is not a simple tick-box exercise but an immersive experience aimed at fostering real understanding and change. Bradley shifts uneasily but nods, waiting for the details. Jacob outlines the program. Bradley will need to attend community service events, starting with a soup kitchen in a neighborhood he's rarely entered except when responding to calls. He will also participate in workshops on racial sensitivity, facilitated by experts who specialize in educating law enforcement. Lastly, there will be sessions with underprivileged communities, places and people Bradley had often viewed with suspicion from behind his badge. It's not a comfortable list, and Bradley feels a knot tighten in his stomach, but he nods again, trying to hide his apprehension. The first event is a workshop led by a soft-spoken yet firm facilitator, a middle-aged woman who begins by inviting everyone to share their experiences with law enforcement. Bradley sits at the back, arms crossed, trying to remain invisible. One by one, the participants speak up. An elderly man talks about being stopped and searched while walking his dog. A mother describes how her teenage son was handcuffed outside their home for no apparent reason. The stories continue, each more heartbreaking than the last, each echoing a common theme: fear, distrust, resentment. Bradley finds himself growing more uncomfortable with every word. These are people he's never met, yet their stories sound all too familiar. They remind him of incidents he had dismissed in the past, encounters he had justified to himself as just doing his job. He shifts in his chair, feeling a creeping sensation of unease. He had never thought of his actions from this perspective, never considered how his presence, his authority, might instill fear rather than safety. The facilitator asks if anyone else would like to speak. Bradley feels a dozen eyes turn toward him, but he remains silent, unwilling to expose himself to their scrutiny. Inside, however, a small seed of doubt begins to take root. As the session ends, he leaves the room quickly, eager to escape the uncomfortable truths that have been laid bare. But even as he steps outside, the words he heard echo in his mind, challenging the beliefs he's held for so long. Bradley's face is a mix of anger, confusion, and something else, something unfamiliar and unsettling. He doesn't know what to make of the emotions swirling within him, only that they don't sit well. For the first time in years, he feels uncertain, a hint of self-doubt creeping in. It's a feeling he doesn't like, but one he can't easily shake off. As he heads home, He knows this is only the beginning, and whether he wants to or not, he's on a path he never expected to walk. Bradley's first assignment at the community center feels like being thrown into unfamiliar waters. The neighborhood is unlike those he's used to patrolling, and it makes him uneasy. He keeps to himself, avoiding eye contact with the locals. The faces around him are wary, mirroring his own guarded expression. He assumes they see him as an outsider, and he sees them as trouble waiting to happen. Old habits die hard, and Bradley clings to his preconceived notions, convinced that his presence here is more of a punishment than a learning experience. But as the days pass, things begin to shift. A young boy, no older than 10, approaches him one afternoon with an innocent curiosity that catches Bradley off guard. "Why don't police protect kids like us?" the boy asks, looking up at him with wide, sincere eyes. Bradley is momentarily speechless, the question cutting through his defenses. He starts to give a standard reply about law enforcement's duty, but the boy interrupts. "No, I mean really. Why do you always think we're bad before you know us?" The simplicity of the question leaves Bradley searching for words. He's never had to answer something like this, and for a moment, he's lost. He mutters something about safety, about doing his job, but he knows his answer sounds hollow even to himself. The next day, Bradley is assigned to help with a discussion group run by a local activist, a woman named Carmen who is known for speaking her mind. The atmosphere is tense from the start. Carmen doesn't waste time with pleasantries, she dives straight into the heart of the matter, addressing Bradley directly. "Do you even realize the damage you've done?" she asks. "Every time you stop someone just because of how they look, you reinforce a cycle of fear and mistrust. Do you even care what that does to a person's dignity, their sense of safety?" Bradley feels defensive, his old instincts kicking in. "I've always done what I thought was right," he responds, his tone sharp. "I'm not the enemy here." Carmen shakes her head, frustration evident on her face. "It's not about being an enemy or a hero," she counters. "It's about the choices you make and who they impact. Have you ever thought about that?" The room is silent, all eyes on him. Bradley feels a heat rise in his chest, anger mingled with shame. He's not used to being questioned like this, to having his actions laid bare for all to see. Carmen continues, her voice calm but firm. "You think you know us, know this community, but you only see the surface. You see what you want to see. That's your problem. You judge before you understand, and that's what makes you dangerous." Bradley feels a jolt of recognition at her words, a crack forming in his carefully built armor. He doesn't know how to respond, doesn't know how to defend himself against the truths she's throwing at him. The rest of the discussion passes in a blur, with more stories from the community, more uncomfortable truths that Bradley can't ignore. He hears their pain, their anger, and he begins to feel a weight he's never felt before. For the first time, he's not just listening, he's hearing them, seeing the human beings behind the statistics and reports. The realization hits him like a blow. He's been wrong, and it's a hard pill to swallow. That evening, Bradley sits alone in his small apartment, the silence almost deafening. He replays the events of the day in his mind, the young boy's question, Carmen's accusations, the raw emotions in the room. He feels a knot in his stomach that won't go away. He's always prided himself on being a good cop, a fair one, but now he's starting to see things differently. He begins to understand that it's not just about enforcing the law. It's about the choices he's made, the people he's hurt without even realizing it. He thinks about the boy's question again. "Why don't police protect kids like us?" The words echo in his mind, and he knows he doesn't have a good answer. He thinks about Carmen's words, her challenge to him to see beyond his own perspective. For the first time, he begins to wonder if he's been part of the problem all along. Bradley takes a deep breath, feeling a mix of emotions, regret, shame, and something new, a desire to understand. He knows he's standing at a crossroads. He can choose to ignore what he's seen and heard, to stick to his old ways, or he can confront the uncomfortable truth about himself. He realizes he doesn't like who he's been, and for the first time, he feels a genuine desire to change, to make amends. He knows the path ahead won't be easy, that he'll have to confront more hard truths, face more uncomfortable conversations. But he also knows it's the only way forward. As he sits in the quiet of his apartment, Bradley feels a small spark of determination ignite within him. He decides right then and there that he's going to try. Not because he has to, but because he wants to. Because it's the right thing to do, Bradley decides to approach the program with a renewed sense of purpose. No longer seeing it as just a way to keep his job, he begins to immerse himself in the activities and events. He volunteers at a local food drive, handing out meals to families he once regarded with suspicion. At first, he feels the familiar discomfort of being out of place, but he pushes through it, determined to prove to himself that he can change. He makes a point to engage with people, asking questions, listening to their stories, learning about their lives. He speaks to an elderly woman who recalls the fears she felt when police cars patrolled her street too often, and to a single father who explains how his teenage son had been treated unfairly by officers just like him. Each conversation chips away at Bradley's old mindset. He realizes that these are people, not profiles. They have hopes, fears, and struggles just like anyone else. He starts to understand the depth of the mistrust between the community and law enforcement, and he feels a growing sense of responsibility to bridge that divide. He apologizes when needed, admits when he's wrong, and slowly, a few begin to soften toward him. He knows it's not enough to erase his past mistakes, but it's a start, and it feels right. One afternoon, he notices the young boy from the community center, the one who had challenged him with that simple but profound question. Bradley makes an effort to approach him, starting a conversation with genuine interest. The boy, named Malik, is initially hesitant, but Bradley persists. Over time, Malik opens up, talking about his dreams, his fears, and the struggles his family faces just trying to get by. Bradley listens, really listens, and finds himself moved by the boy's resilience and honesty. They begin to meet regularly, and slowly, a friendship forms. Malik asks Bradley questions about the police, and Bradley does his best to answer honestly, even when the answers are uncomfortable. He starts to see the world through Malik's eyes, the constant fear of being judged, the lack of opportunities, the daily battles against prejudice. Bradley realizes that Malik is not just a kid from the neighborhood but a symbol of all the young lives shaped by the harsh realities of systemic bias. This friendship becomes a mirror, reflecting back to Bradley the kind of man he wants to become, one who understands, who empathizes, who protects rather than persecutes. Despite his efforts, not everyone is willing to accept Bradley's transformation. In the community, some remain skeptical, their memories of his past behavior too vivid to be easily erased. They whisper among themselves, questioning his motives, wondering if this change is real or just an act to save face. Bradley hears the murmurs, feels the cold stares, but he doesn't back down. He knows he has a long way to go, and he is willing to put in the work, however hard it may be. Back at the police station, he encounters resistance from his colleagues as well. Some officers view him as a traitor, accusing him of betraying the force, of pandering to people who hate cops. Bradley feels the weight of their disapproval, the distance growing between him and the men he once called friends. It stings, but he understands now that real change often comes with a cost. He has made his choice, and he is prepared to face the consequences. The dual backlash from both sides only strengthens his resolve. Bradley refuses to let the negativity derail him. He continues attending community events, speaking up when others stay silent, and standing firm in his commitment to change. He knows he is walking a difficult path, one that will require patience, humility, and perseverance. But for the first time in his life, he feels like he's moving in the right direction, driven by a purpose greater than himself. Bradley stands beside Jacob at the public forum, his heart pounding as he faces the crowd. The room is filled with people from all walks of life, community members, activists, officers, and local leaders. He takes a deep breath, knowing that this moment is crucial. His hands tremble slightly, but he steadies himself, ready to speak. "I'm not here to ask for forgiveness," he begins, his voice clear but heavy with emotion. "I'm here to admit that I was wrong. For too long, I thought I was doing my job the right way, but I've come to understand that I was part of the problem. I've hurt people, damaged trust, and for that, I am truly sorry." He pauses, letting his words sink in, feeling the weight of the silence that follows. "This journey hasn't been easy," he continues, "and it's far from over. I've had to confront things about myself that I didn't want to see, acknowledge mistakes I didn't want to admit. But I'm here, standing in front of you, because I want to be better. I want to be a part of the solution, not the problem." Bradley's voice falters for a moment, but he presses on. "I've learned that change begins with listening, with understanding, and with the courage to challenge our own beliefs. I've started that journey, and I am committed to continuing it every day." The audience is a mix of reactions. Some faces are softened, others remain stern and skeptical. Bradley knows not everyone will believe him, and he doesn't expect them to. But he hopes his honesty, his willingness to be vulnerable, will reach some. Jacob steps forward, speaking next to him. "Change is hard," Jacob says, his tone supportive yet firm. "It requires more than words, it requires actions, consistent and genuine. Bradley has taken the first steps on the long path, and it's up to all of us to hold each other accountable, to encourage growth, and to believe in the possibility of transformation." The room is quiet for a moment before a few tentative claps begin, growing slowly into a respectful applause. There are still doubters, still those who look on with distrust, but Bradley feels a shift. He senses a new understanding taking root, even if just a small one. Some people nod in approval, others remain skeptical, their arms crossed, their expressions doubtful. He sees familiar faces from the community center, a mix of encouragement and cautious optimism. Jacob's words resonate, reinforcing the message that transformation is not a one-time event but a continuous effort. "We all have biases, prejudices, things we must confront," Jacob says, his gaze sweeping across the room. Bradley's journey shows that it's possible to face those things head-on and come out the other side ready to make a difference. But it's up to each of us to decide if we want to be a part of that change. Bradley stands there, feeling a mix of relief and uncertainty. He knows he's taken a step, but he also knows that there is much more to be done. He sees Malik in the crowd, the young boy who had been a catalyst for his change. Malik gives him a small, almost imperceptible nod, and for the first time, Bradley feels a genuine sense of hope. The crowd begins to disperse, some stopping to shake his hand, others still whispering among themselves. But Bradley is okay with that. He knows he's made an impact, even if just a small one. Later that evening, Bradley sits alone, reflecting on everything that's happened. He thinks about where he started, the man he was when this journey began. He recognizes that he has changed, but he also understands that change is not a final destination, it's a daily commitment. He knows he still has much to learn, that he will still make mistakes, but he is willing to keep trying, to keep growing. He feels a sense of peace in that realization, a new purpose taking shape within him. He decides he will continue to work with the community, to be present, to show up not just as an officer but as a human being who wants to build trust and understanding. He commits to being an advocate for fair policing practices, to mentoring younger officers, and to sharing his experiences so that others may learn from them. He knows he can never fully erase the past, but he also knows that he can create a better future. As he stands up, ready to leave, he feels lighter, more at ease with himself. He knows this is just the beginning, that the road ahead is long and challenging, but for the first time, he feels prepared to walk it. Bradley turns to see Jacob waiting for him at the back of the room. They exchange a nod of mutual respect and understanding. Together they leave the forum, stepping out into the cool night air, a silent promise between them, a commitment to the hard work of change. A voiceover begins, underscoring their steps. Change begins with a single step, and the courage to walk a different path. As they move forward, side by side, the city lights flicker in the distance, a symbol of hope and the endless possibility of transformation.